Hey there, how's it going? I'm Jordan from the Visual Studio team, and I'm excited to walk you through a whole bunch of stuff the team has been working on to give you great experiences building Windows Store apps using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Got a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to jump in pretty quick, hoping to touch on a little bit of the develop, design, and debugging experience. Just give you a flavor of all the little bits and pieces in there to help you get started building your applications. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So this is an application I've been working on called Buckets. So what Buckets is it's an application, a lot like other to-do list applications you might have seen, where you've got lists of things that I call buckets. And in those buckets you can put like to-do items to work on. In Buckets, I'll let you store text or images or websites. They're just buckets for holding things you want to look at later on. So when you get into the application here, you see this start screen with a list of your buckets. You can come in and look at the different items you have in your buckets, add a new item, come back to the start screen, and you could open up a new bucket. There you go. Got some other integration with the Windows share charm so that like in Internet Explorer I could take a website and just share it into this application. The amount of time we have today, unfortunately, I can't walk you through all the functionality of the app and how to build all of it, but what I am going to do is show you how I got started building the UI. That way you can get a feel for getting up and going with your application real quick. We're going to go into Visual Studio here and create a new project. Since we're here to talk about JavaScript and Windows Store, you want to go into the JavaScript Windows Store category and pick a template to get started. I know these like the back of my hand by now, but what you should do is go through and take a look at the preview images and the descriptions, get a feel for which one fits your application. I happen to want split, so I'm going to come up with the oh-so-clever Buckets2 name and hit OK. Let me just run the template so you can see what these give you by default. So here you see the start screen. It's got a bunch of groups on the screen. You can go into any one of these groups and see all the items in those groups. And click on each one here and you see the details of the items on the right side. I can take and snap this over and see the Windows 8 snapped view. Just a smaller form factor of your application. This is the same source code. CSS3 media queries are being used to show this alternate rendering of these items. And I can fill it back out again. Just a quick example of a few of the things the template will give you. Let's go ahead and make our first edit. Come back to Visual Studio, and what I want to do first is go for a light background, kind of a light theme versus that black background and all the gray that you saw. You'll see UI-dark.css included in all of your files. You can replace that with another file named UI-light.css. Replace all. And this time I'll just go ahead and run it in the simulator. And now you'll see the application loads up, and now we've got a white background, a lighter color theme going on here. So this time we're running in the simulator, and like you might guess the name, the simulator simulates things. And in this case, it's simulating stuff that your device may or may not do. So for example, I'm on a device here that has touch capability, so you see here that I'm able to use my finger to move around on the screen. But you may not have touch. A lot of people don't. So I could come and simulate touch using the simulator. And lets me do such things as simulate pinch and zoom, rotation gestures. And you can go down and you can also choose to rotate the screen and see how well your application responds to portrait mode, landscape mode, changing back and forth between those. And then I could change the screen resolution to resolutions that may be smaller or bigger than my device supports. And I can use this to set the location of my device if I'm doing something that's location aware, so I can move my computer to Europe if I wanted to. Unfortunately not for real, but I can simulate it at least. So let's go ahead and make our first edit. And this time I want to get rid of these images because I don't need images for my buckets. I'm going to hit the F12 key. And if you've ever used Internet Explorer, you'll find this to be very similar to what happens in there. It brings up this DOM Explorer that lets you see the visual tree of your application and come through and explore the items in the page. I can click Select Element, find the one I want to change, come back and it's highlighted the item in the screen that I want. In this case, it's an image. It's probably one I want to get rid of, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the source code. And this is something I really like that's not in F12, which is this element source link at the top. If I click that, it takes me into my source code where that element actually exists, so I don't have to go searching around. And scroll down and we'll find, looks like the right image element. Let's just delete that. And this time I'm going to click this refresh icon. And what this does, it takes the static assets like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and pushes them back into your application for you quicker than if you did a debug, build, rebuild process. So you see those images are gone. Now I want to tweak the width and height, get rid of these boxes. So I can hit Control B, which is a quick shortcut for select element. Same thing in Internet Explorer. I could come through with this Trace Styles tab and find the height and width. And I could click through into my application and find where in the source that is and change it and rerun the app. But what I'm going to do is show you one other tool called Blend. So let's find the HTML for our page and right-click on this. Open in Blend. And what Blend does is give you a visual design surface to work with. So I get to work with my application, and I can change elements on the screen, like just delete group subtitle here. And you see the change applied right away. Gives you a nice quick way to work with your design without having to go and modify your markup, rerun the application, keep trial and error. And we want to get rid of the height and width in these boxes. So I'm going to come in and we're going to search for the height property. We'll just delete that. And there you see they're all shrunken up. So that looks pretty good for now. Let's make another change. Now we're going to add in that app bar. If you remember, that's what I used in my application to bring up the flyout to add a new bucket. Take the app bar and drop it onto our work surface. And we're going to add a button called the flyout button, and I'll just show you what this is here. So if you go to the HTML attributes, you'll see a bunch of the custom settings here for this control. You can say add bucket for the name. We'll give it an icon. I could scroll through the list of icons here, or in my case, I happen to know the name of the icon I want is just add. So I'm going to type it in, save that change. I want to move this over to the other side of the screen. Looking good. And now we'll create a flyout. And let me show you what a flyout is by way of example. So I'm going to use this feature here called interactive mode, one of my favorite things in Blend. It lets you run your application in Blend and actually put it into different states that aren't visible by default. So for example, if I scroll down here, you'll see the app bar is not visible right now. I can right-click, brings up my button, click the button, and I get my flyout, exit out of interactive mode, and that flyout's left open for us ready to work with it. There's another way I could have activated the app bar, but this was a good excuse to show you this feature. So let's add in our text field and button for this. So we'll add in the button. I'll just save our changes, and I'm going to just trust it. I'm not going to run it. We'll just close it. Give it a try. Back in Visual Studio, you'll see that it saw the files were changed by Blend, reloads them into the IDE for you. And if we come to items.html, you'll see that we have our flyout all ready to go. So this last part of the walkthrough, we're going to go into the JavaScript story a little bit and talk about editing your JavaScript and debugging. I'm going to open up items.js, which is the JavaScript for this page. This contains a bunch of functions handling the logic of the page. The one we're most interested in right now is this ready function. This runs anytime a user navigates to this page. And the last thing we want to do here is wire up that add bucket button. So we'll use good old get element by ID to get our button. We'll listen for the click event. And now we're going to get the name to use. So something cool I want to show here. The JavaScript IntelliSense story has changed a whole lot with 2012. And one of the coolest things we've done is we're actually running your JavaScript as you type it. And so your recommendations in IntelliSense here are based off of your running code, including the elements in the DOM. So for example, I've selected an input item here, and if I go to look for value, you'll see both value, and you'll also see value as number, which is an attribute that applies only to an input element. We want to use value, but look what happens if I come up to this same call, get element by ID, against a button element. If I hit dot and bring up value, you don't see value as number because it doesn't apply to a button. I think that's just so cool, especially that it's running my JavaScript. You get into some really interesting things that may have given you a bad experience writing JavaScript before, but if you check it out again now, just see what you think. I think you'll like the changes. I'm going to set a breakpoint on this code because we don't have time to finish it off right now, but I can show you how to debug this. So we had a breakpoint, and we'll rerun our app. And when I bring up the button and click it, Visual Studio will jump to that breakpoint in the debugger, and now we can start working with our code. You might already be familiar with the debugger, but I'm going to go ahead and walk through it real quick for you. There's the ability to hover over different variables and see the properties of those objects. I can come down to the locals window here and explore all the variables that are in scope for my code right now. I could come to the watch window and watch a specific variable, and I could see how its value changes over time. The call stack, if I had a number of functions that led to this point, they would show up in this list, and I could jump back and forth between them. And we call out the file those are in. So if I were using a library with my application, I would be able to tell what's library code and what's my own code. Then I could use the immediate window to debug my JavaScript, but what's a better option now is this new feature called the JavaScript console. And one of the things that makes it better is it will actually give you some renderings of your elements. I got a DOM element in this case and pull it into the debugger, and I get the visual tree. I get the visual representation of it. I can say console.dir, and I can get a tree view to look at the details of the object. A lot of other cool things too. This is actually able to just, you can debug your JavaScript in here as well, write new JavaScript and test it out and see how it goes. So with that, I think that's everything I wanted to cover for today. I know it was a lot of information. I'm pretty sure I touched on all I wanted. I hope it at least gave you a feel for the different things you can use in building your applications. And I'd say get out there, check out some of the other sessions we got in this event, and start playing with it. Thanks a lot for your time. Take care.